So you got the skills, drive, consistency, and the willpower to rank up in your games and be among the best there is in Valorant. There's only one thing left, though, missing in your arsenal that's keeping you from dominating your matches, and that's your settings. Kidding aside, it actually matters a lot more than you might think. So let's go over the ultimate settings guide for 2025. And I've actually divided this into 3 different categories, namely in-game settings, computer, and real world. But before we get into it, if you feel like you've been struggling in ranked recently, then we have got an absolute treat for you. Over at SkillCapped, we have recently published a brand new Calm Aim course that details how any one of you could develop Radiant level aim in just a few weeks. Now, while most players just aim in whatever way that feels most comfortable to them, it might surprise you to hear that there's actually a proper aiming technique that pros use to not only make themselves more consistent, but to also help them get more kills like this. In our course, we're going to teach you this proper technique and even provide you with an aim training routine that you can use to instantly start improving your aim and climbing today. Now, unlike other routines, this is a simple, less than 15-minute exercise that you can do before you play that's going to do wonders for your aim. Not only that, but our site is literally backed by a rank improvement guarantee. So if you don't climb, you simply do not pay. If you're really looking to climb this act and want to actually start fragging out in your matches, be sure to check out our new Calm Aim course using the link below. In-game settings are the direct settings you can tinker with while you're playing in the game. And while it's true that Valorant settings aren't one size fits all, they're all a little bit different, there is always a general range and a recommendation that's best followed for your optimal experience, at least until you find your own flavor once you learn how to fine-tune your configurations based on your own experience playing the game and your own convenience. So once you open your Valorant settings, the first thing you're going to look at is the general settings. Here you can tinker with your general layout, your user interface, your mouse sensitivity, and other in-game essentials that'll really help you along your way. Under accessibility, you're going to notice that the default enemy highlight color is red. Now, while this can be entirely based on your own preference, most people, including myself, find yellow or purple highlight a lot easier to spot. This allows you to respond a little bit faster to that specific color as soon as your eye spots it within your screen. Now, as for your mouse sensitivity, again, this is mostly dependent on what you're most comfortable with. Many beginners usually start with ridiculously high sensitivity, but end up lowering it to below 1 as they improve their mechanics. The general rule is to adjust your sensitivity depending on how much physical space you have to move your mouse on your mousepad. More mouse space equals lower mouse sensitivity. This also depends on the DPI of your mouse, though. So you should generally find a middle ground where your mouse feels comfortable on both your desktop and in-game. If you're aiming to change your sensitivity though, always adjust gradually until you find your sweet spot. Don't just crank it. Going for micro adjustments between 0.02 and 0.05 once your sensitivity is below 1 is a slow and steady way to reduce or increase your mouse sensitivity, which gives you ample time to adapt as you adjust. Next, make sure to toggle your raw input buffer on for faster command response. Minimap settings are a bit preference-based as well, but at the very least, you should turn off Keep Player Centered. Having this toggled on, what it does is it minimizes your view on the minimap, and it's really dependent on your exact location. On the other hand though, turning it off allows you to see the entire map, which is useful for gathering info based on what your teammates see on other areas of the map. Now, as for rotate, it's best to toggle this on so the minimap aligns with where you're currently looking. Tens mentioned that this is useful for instances where you aim head level and shoot based on minimap contact, especially since the ping feature for spamming's been nerfed. I always try to keep my minimap size to at least 1 and with a zoom of 0.85 to get a clear view of the map. Now, this is recommended so you don't have a hard time trying to spot the visual cues available on the minimap. However, if you do find it a little bit too distracting because of its size, feel free to adjust accordingly based on what you're most comfortable with. If you want to minimize effects and general clutter during fights though, you should also turn off Show Mature Content, Blood, and Corpses. Next up, we have the video or graphics settings. Now, it's always best to keep your display mode set to full screen. Doing so minimizes the occurrence of input delay in your games. However, most streamers do find windowed full screen a little bit more useful since they tend to alt-tab a little bit more. I'd still recommend sticking to full screen for optimal performance. For resolution, always stick with your monitor's inherent display settings to avoid some conflicts and boost your frames as well. You should also switch Reflex Low Latency to On plus Boost to stabilize your FPS and minimize render latency. Now, while it's nice to see your game at its full graphics potential, most pro players set their graphic quality to the lowest option and turn off additional effects. Doing so is going to give you the maximum amount of frames that can be greatly advantageous once you start playing the game. The only absolutely minor drawback to this is that you might not be able to see certain details on your map if you're a lineup Larry who relies on specific markings. You want to keep your anti-aliasing and anisotropic filtering at 2 times, while the rest at low or off if you prioritize frames over visual quality. For stats, the only important ones to include, if you'd like to, are your client FPS, network RTT, and packet loss. Controls and keybinds are a little bit more personal as it depends on what you've learned or are most used to in your previous FPS games. Nevertheless, I definitely do have a few recommendations that you might want to try for yourself for your utmost convenience. For instance, I usually assign my thumb mouse buttons to ability 1 and 2. This allows me to satchel a little bit better and faster when using raise, and it generally does feel a little bit more comfortable and seamless than having to press their corresponding letter on the keyboard. Now, if you're the type to have specific agents on rotation, you could also personalize it a little bit further by setting up agent profiles that you'd like to have a customized key binding to. So whenever you use them on any match, the agent profile is just going to automatically apply the controls you've set on that specific agent. An example of this is how I created a Yoru profile and set his dimensional rift to mouse wheel down. This gives me a seamless transition between exiting the ult and pulling out a shorty or shotgun. Some players, especially those with CS background, often bind their jump key to mouse wheel down, which allows them to bunny hop a little bit easier. However, if you're not used to this motion, it may take a little bit of time to get used to, but the rewards can be fulfilling once you master your movement with it. Under equipment, you should also change how your aim down sights and sniper scope work. Ideally, you want to set rifles to hold so you can seamlessly switch back after aiming down sight. Now, as for sniper scopes, there's a trick Tins learned specifically from CNED that you might want to try to maximize your opping capabilities. There can be some learning curve to this, we know that, but being able to switch between the operator zoom without unscoping is actually a pretty useful tech. So moving on to your computer settings. These are going to be the settings you need to tinker with on your desktop before even starting the game. Now, as I've mentioned DPI a little while ago in the video, and depending on your mouse and the software it's using, make sure to set the DPI to a comfortable level. The usual range for Valorant players does start between 800 and 1600, so try to experiment with the balance between this and your mouse sensitivity to find that sweet spot in the middle. Now, as for your NVIDIA or AMD settings, just be sure to have Valorant optimized in your specific GPU. This should also prioritize performance over quality so the game can run more smoothly and with boosted frames. So now on to the last bit, but equally as important, we have the real-world settings. This pertains to you and your computer's physical setup, which has to also be conducive to your body's physical comfort and convenience. Now, a wide table is definitely necessary so your keyboard and your mouse have enough space not to bump into each other. Having that ample mouse room also reduces strain on your wrist, especially during extended gaming periods. Now, ideally, you should also position your monitor at an eye-level height to keep your neck and your head in a natural position to avoid neck and back pains. We've definitely all been there. And to quote from other gamers here, gaming chair buff is real. So try to invest in a comfortable ergonomic chair if you can and you have the funds to do so. Don't really think of this as a purely Valorant type of expenditure here. It'll have many uses later on, whether for work, leisure, and other games as well. All right, though, guys, before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little bit more about SkillCapped. So we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and we think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's kind of like a gym membership guaranteeing you that you're gonna get ripped. Your local gym would probably go bust if they offered you that. But not us, because we've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium Valorant guides on the internet. We add new courses every month with over 1,000 guides curated into over 50 courses. No one can compare. We also have a direct line of communication with subscribers in our Discord so that you can get connected immediately to some of the best players in the game who will respond to every question you ask. Sign up today for as little as $6.99 a month if you're serious about improving your game. So that's going to be all for this one today, everyone. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.